Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about handoffs to clients that don't have technical skills. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how should I hand over a WordPress site to some client that doesn't understand how to perform updates? And the short answer is you need to do two things. The first thing is that you need to have a small workshop as part of doing the handoff. And the second thing is that you need to set up some documentation for standard tasks. Let me explain. So this is one of those things where some developers feel like, oh, this is absolute bullshit. Why should I have to do this? And the thing that you have to do, which feels like bullshit to quite a lot of developers, is that you need to take responsibility above and beyond what you would expect from most craftsmen. It's not that often where a craftsman has to take responsibility for the I'm not, well, let's call it being uninformed, because I can't come up with a better term for it that is nice. But if you are dealing with a customer who buys something off you and they don't know how to use it, it usually isn't your responsibility to educate them in how to use it. But in this scenario, when it comes to IT, it's actually in your best interest, because nothing gets annoying as quickly as having to deal with a customer who doesn't, and most customers, they have no boundaries, guys. Like, there are no boundaries in terms of, oh, what are you, when can they call you, and when can't they call you. Usually the rule is, if everything works perfectly and they know what they're doing, they never call you again, until of course they need something else built, perhaps. But most of the time they call you with every little question. You go for, especially for the really small companies, if you're doing freelance work, they have a tendency to treat you like tech support very quickly. And you have to make that fateful way off that every business owner has to make, and that is, how much is this annoying me and causing me problems, versus how well do I want to treat my customers? What's the customer experience going to be like? And in order for you to mitigate that as much as possible, you really need to make sure that you give them some type of send-off package or handoff package where the most common things, at the very least, are covered. As an example, performing updates or things like that. If you're dealing with a person who has absolutely no idea how to use a computer, or doesn't know how to do updates or things like that, as soon as there's a box saying that you need to update something, or a box stopping them from doing anything on their system, they're going to call you for help, for tech support. Even if you are well done, like the whole thing is over and the contract is fulfilled, that doesn't matter to these people, because they need someone to ask, and they're going to ask you rather than try to figure it out on their own. Most people don't actually try to figure out how to do these things by themselves. They usually fork it off to somebody else that has more knowledge, and in this case that's going to be you. So for you, investing in a handoff workshop is something extremely useful. It's something that I would say is useful for pretty much every developer who's dealing especially with a cross-functional team or anything like that. It's a rule that I've had for quite a few years now, where I insist on, it's not up for discussion, I insist on that every week, as part of every sprint or every delivery we do, when I work in the cross-functional teams, we always have a Friday meeting where we go over what's been delivered, and the developers showcase what they have delivered, and they showcase how it works, roughly. It doesn't have to be something special. We just sit down for about an hour and we just walk through we have a bit of a retrospective. We talk a bit about, okay, we made this looks like this, and this is how it works, etc., etc. And then the stakeholders, the business people and the PO and everybody, like, they just kind of look at it again, and usually there's a few healthy discussions that come from that, and sometimes we actually even get some actions based on the discussion. But the most important thing is that this is spreading awareness, and it's educating our non-technical staff. Because if we don't do this, and if we don't repeat it, it doesn't matter how annoying it is that I've shown my stakeholders for the 100th time why they can't just assume that our test environment has the latest code. They do not. It does, because it matters so little to them. That's one part of the problem, and the other part of the problem is that they are not programmers. They're not developers. They don't understand. So repeating this process, even though it's annoying in many cases, is very vital, because if you don't, they're going to call you every 5 minutes and bother you instead. And if you can make them autonomous and like make them perform certain simple tasks, then at the very least you're going to reduce the amount of time they have to call you. And that's why this is it's a very important investment, especially if this is something that's going to get in the way for you as a freelancer, because then there's really no motivation for you to maintain an IT support line. Unless, as I said, you really are big on customer satisfaction. The other part is to create some basic documentation. It's extremely important that you do this. You can make it very generic. It can be a reference to somebody else's documentation. It doesn't really matter if it's your documentation or somebody else's, as long as you can use it. What's important is that you provide things that you can reference, so that if somebody has a question, one of your customers wonders how to perform an update or change their password or whatever it is that they want to do, right? That there is something that you can just send them, like a link, so that you don't have to walk them through it every single time, because it's going to take a lot of time for you, especially if you have more than one of these people who keeps on calling you. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way to properly hand off a project to a non-technical stakeholder, regardless of if it's a WordPress site or something else, whatever you build, is that you need to make sure that you have some type of walkthrough of the common stuff that is going to be required of a user of this system. If the user doesn't know how to use the system, that's not going to matter to them at all. They're going to call you and they're going to ask how to do it. And unless you want to play tech support forever and ever, you need to create either a system that is so dirt simple that everybody gets it, or you have to make sure that they know how to do the things that they need to get done, because at the end of the day, that's what they want. They don't care so much about your code, they care about that the system does what they expect it to do and that they understand how it works. The second part that you need to do is that you should invest into having clear tutorials or guides, something that you can send them that just shows them how to do these common things, FAQ type of stuff, so that you can just give them something to read through every single time they ask you a question, and hopefully that's going to help them become more autonomous, and instead of calling you, they might actually read the thing or try it on their own, which is exactly what you want. And finally, you need to ask yourself that question, because it's very easy, especially as a freelancer, to get roped into doing tech support for people. How important is customer satisfaction for you, and where do you draw the boundaries? My suggestion to you is that you try to be as nice and forthcoming as possible, but you need to also communicate to your customer that if they want a quick answer to something, sure, you might be able to help them out with that. But if they're asking for more complicated things and actually needs you to walk through things over and over again, then they're going to have to pay for your hours, because now it's not just you being nice. Now it's actually them stealing away from your business. Have a great day.